People have been asking for my breakdown on the Capitol mess, so here it is. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. By definition, domestic terrorism is domestic terrorism regardless if it's the left wing or the right wing doing it. If you're right wing and you want to role play martyr, obviously it's not going to go well. I wasn't at the event and didn't want to be for multiple reasons, but those who committed domestic terrorism did exactly that. Everybody who died, really sad. Now here's where it gets weird. Who's really benefiting from this? It's not Trump. He got wiped off and deplatformed everything. It's not right-wing apps like Parlor. They've got wiped off the Apple and Google store. It's not Trump supporters or conservatives. They're getting purged from social media and accused of everything under the sun. Who really benefits from this? Well, just listen to the Associated Press. The attack on the U.S. Capitol last week brought more viewers to CNN than any other single day in the network's 40-year history, eclipsing even Election Day 2016. They benefited. ABC News, One Day That Changed America, 24 Hours, Assault on the Capitol, premieres Monday on Hulu. Wow, they got a Hulu documentary out that fast? They're benefiting. Big tech benefits, Trump's enemies benefit, Democrats absolutely benefit, and even establishment politicians like Mitch McConnell, who especially don't like Trump since he's been fighting with him for months, they all benefit. Even model Emily, I don't know how to pronounce her name, realized this. She said, anyone else feel like proper amount of Capitol Police being absent / letting Trump people in / providing insane visuals of MAGA dudes on the floor of the House was wildly convenient to justifying big tech's rollout of censorship? She explained herself, this gives Facebook tech Zuck the most power. If he could shut the president up or off, he could shut any of us up or off. My concern is that this gives big tech the opportunity to shut down leftist extremists who are important political organizers. And within days, left-wing podcasts and people got kicked off of Twitter as well, although it's mostly right-wing, but yeah, she's right. And I'm not saying they meant this to happen or made it happen. Of course, there were organic crimes that were committed. Although it was outlandish, this wasn't the first time domestic terrorism was committed on our soil.
Not everyone gathered here in Washington today came to celebrate President Trump's inauguration. Protesters lined part of the parade route, and in some parts of the Capitol, there were confrontations with police.
The anger reaching a boiling point in the nation's capital after President Trump took the oath of office. Police in riot gear facing off against the protesters just 6 blocks from the inaugural parade. Unleashing pepper spray, concussion grenades, all to disperse the crowd.
Burning cars and smashed windows. A small group of protesters dressed in black, their faces covered, armed with hammers and bricks. Facing off with thousands of officers on site, many in riot gear, confronting them with flashbang grenades and pepper spray. Before the swearing-in ceremony even began, protesters tried to block checkpoint entrances. During President Trump's speech, several demonstrators were escorted out of the area. Several officers injured during the protest today, and more than 100 people arrested. Tonight, thousands of protesters.
In fact, it was happening all last year, and media and politicians seem to be thrilled about it, complacent about it, and the double standards never seem to apply. Forbes reported after 14 days of protests for George Floyd, 19 people were dead. Property damages from civil disorder during the George Floyd protests totaled more than $2 billion. Dozens of people died, including retired police captain David Dorn, killed on Facebook Live while protecting his friend's pawn shop. Was Facebook given the Parlor or Gab treatment when he got killed on Facebook Live? Were they blamed for it? Well, of course not, because Democrats and big tech figured out how to capitalize no matter what happens. When the left wing is doing domestic terrorism, they get billions of dollars of fundraising off of it, act like it doesn't exist, promote it, support it, give the thumbs up, turn a blind eye, and make a killing off it, potentially even winning the 2020 election off the backs of it. When it happens to the right wing, they do the complete opposite, raise money off it still, but then censorship and destroy not just the domestic terrorists who committed terrorism, but any person who was innocent at the event who had no idea that that was going to happen. Tens of thousands of people showed up not thinking any violence or domestic terrorism, especially considering most of the events that these people have gone to have been peaceful, and a lot of them didn't know it was going to happen. And as far as Parlor getting deplatformed for being associated with it, does this happen to other social media? Washington Post, no one who watched the New Zealand shooter's video live reported it to the Facebook company says. says. So people watched that massacre live on Facebook. 2,200 people viewed Germany shooting before Twitch removed post. New Zealand shooting on Facebook live stream viewed thousands of times before it was removed. A mass shooter live streamed his attack on Snapchat at an Arizona mall. A shooter live streams Thailand's worst ever mass shooting. So there have been equal or worse offenses that were streamed and hosted by all major tech outlets who never got penalized the same way Parlor and Gab have gotten penalized. Do you know why? Because they're really just using this as an excuse to axe their competition. You could look at Jack of Twitter posting this ominous, oh look, Signal's #1. That's after Parlor was forcefully removed from the Apple Store and Parlor was #1. Even left-wing journalist Glenn Greenwald caught big tech in their obvious lie.
So of the first 13 people arrested by the FBI in connection with the event at the Capitol, a total of 0 were active users of Parlor. The overwhelming amount of planning for that event, the overwhelming amount of advocacy for people to go there and to breach the Capitol was done on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter. And this is one of the ironies, is that Google was one of the monopolies that wants to police our discourse and control our thinking and rule our politics, that kicked Parlor off of its app at exactly the time that Parlor had gone to #1, the most downloaded app in the country, millions of Americans wanting to use it. Google said, we will not allow you on our service because you have the role that you played in stimulating violence and extremism at the Capitol and elsewhere. And the reality is the service that Google owns, YouTube, played a much greater role in organizing and advocating for that event at the Capitol. If Google was really interested in disassociating itself from violence and extremism, they wouldn't disassociate themselves from Parlor, but from YouTube. And you had Democratic politicians like AOC and others demanding that Google and Apple kick Parlor off, using their power as officials in the party that's about to assume control of the government, and they then obeyed. But why weren't these Democratic officials demanding that Google and Apple kick Facebook and YouTube off of their platforms, since they played a much bigger role? Because they donate and pour huge amounts of money into the Democratic Party and are their allies. And that's what is so menacing here, not just the censorship from Silicon Valley, but the partnership they're in with the party that's about to take over the Congress and the White House.
Out of the dozens of people who died from George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests, was every single speaker at a Black Lives Matter event charged? Are they being treated like terrorists and having all their social media accounts taken down? Well, of course not, because if they didn't commit a crime and they didn't commit domestic terrorism, they shouldn't be charged. Just like people at this Trump event who didn't commit domestic terrorism shouldn't be charged, but that's not what the media is doing. They're not fair. And if you want to be honest, as terrible as this event ended up, it was one day, condemned by almost every single Republican, including Trump himself. These riots turning into murders, turning into destruction of hundreds of businesses were happening over the course of a month. And every day it was like the same thing. It was Groundhog Day. It would happen, it would happen, it would happen, it would happen. And at a certain point, the speakers at these events knew that it was going to happen after their rally, but they didn't care. And Kamala Harris said if you're able to chip in now to the MN Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota, as there was destruction, chaos, riots, murders going on in Minnesota, which of course Kamala knew about, she was bailing out criminals. Protesters do not get arrested. If you follow the law, it's protected by the Constitution, or it should be. So who they were probably bailing out were not protesters, they were most likely criminals or domestic terrorists. And same with a lot of celebrities, bailing out the criminals. Peaceful protesters who follow the law don't get arrested.
I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not.
I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement.
And trust me, I think Trump's behavior over the last 3 or 4 months was completely goofy. That's why I didn't want to go. He's been just selling Moderna, Operation Warp Speed vaccines and saying generic stuff about the election. I think he has every right to legally try to win the election, of course, but to be quite fair, somebody who voted for him, I didn't like how he handled it over the last few months, and I didn't want to go. I think it was sloppily done, and I think it was stupid. However, if you compare Trump's words to words of Democrats, it's hard to think that they weren't inciting violence and riots and domestic terrorism times 30. Take a look.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look, as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And let's not forget Congressman Steve Scalise was shot at a softball game, and Rand Paul was tackled at his house and had his ribs broken by psychotic left-wingers. Hard to think they weren't inspired from rhetoric like that. But most of big tech, most of mainstream media, most celebrity culture is all run by Democrats or liberals. So if they do domestic terrorism or they incite violence or they do times 1,000 of what you do, it doesn't matter because they cover it up, bail people out of jail, and figure out a way to capitalize on it and make you look like the bad person. So when they're doing domestic terrorism, you're the bad person, they raise money, they win elections off it. When your side of the debate does domestic terrorism, it doesn't make it right. Obviously, I don't agree with it, but somehow they figure out a way to capitalize on both, put out Hulu documentaries, get mass viewership, censorship. I will give them one thing. They've definitely figured out the dirty game of politics and how to win regardless of what happens or who's in office. And now this is going to be used to take away Trump's banks, take him out of movies. They're trying to give him treatment as if he never existed, destroy his life, destroy his family, destroy anything he's ever touched. And what I think is worse, destroy the lives of tens of thousands of people who were not domestic terrorists, who were just at the event thinking it was going to go peacefully because they supported the president and wanted to do a protest. There have been hundreds of protests in this country, from the Women's March to people who hate Trump outside the White House. This is not new. Obviously, the chaos and terrorism inside the Capitol, I would say, is new. And I'm not even remotely justifying it all, so don't twist my words, but what I am saying is what's unprecedented also is how they're broadening the brush, broadening the goalposts, and trying to use this terrible event as a way to justify what they wanted to do anyway. They hate President Trump. They were going to kick him off social media eventually. He just lobbed them up with a really dumb way to do it immediately. I don't believe for a second that they weren't going to do this. And as far as anybody associated with him, they hate conservatives. They hate anybody who leans right-wing, who wants lower taxes, more freedom. And in the COVID-19 lockdown world, which in my perspective, Trump kind of caved to, now they micromanage every single aspect of your life, and they just want to control more. So do they really think 80 million people who support the president are racist? Do they really think you're a huge threat because you're a horrible person and everyone's a domestic terrorist? I don't think so. I think they know the domestic terrorists are domestic terrorists, but as far as everybody at the event, any single person, any single politician who signed off on trying to defend President Trump winning the election, I don't even agree with what they were doing, but that makes them directly responsible for every bad thing that happened in the Capitol. There have been left-wing people who literally shot sitting members of Congress who were fans of mainstream left-wing media. Rabid left-wing people tackling and breaking the ribs of Rand Paul. We've had domestic terror attacks literally on Congress. And they don't broaden the brush and blame the whole news network or blame the whole app where it was live streamed. This isn't what they do. But this is what they do when they want to control everything, when they want to double standard you into a slave world where you have no rights, no freedom, and the Patriot Act that they signed years ago can be used against you, because it seems like they're trying to label millions of people as a terrorist. And I think it's really unfair. I think it's really dangerous. And I think they know exactly what they're doing. Or they're just so power hungry that maybe they don't know. I tweeted this and both sides got mad at me, but I said hating Trump supporters is a trap, hating liberals is a trap. The people running the show are laughing at both sides. Let's do better this year. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but one of the things that really freed me was realizing how stubborn both sides are. If you tell an inconvenient truth to either side, people freak out at you. It's become such a cult team sport-like thing that I'll give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they really aren't thinking rationally and they're just so dialed into their side, they think they're doing the right thing. Either way, deplatforming Parlor Gab, taking Trump off of everything and trying to label all his supporters as the problem, calling them Nazis for 4 years straight, and then trying to act like full-blown communists against any single person who literally just wants to work a job, have a family, be left alone, and leans to the right when it comes to policy and politics. Treat them the same way that you would treat the same people on the left who have done 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 200 times more to incite violence and terrorism. And the hypocrisy is almost humorous. On the side that completely hated cops last year and suggested that all of them were evil, just mushing over these police as their heroes, and they've loved them so much. I mean, both sides will flip on a dime. Let me know what you think in the comment section. God bless you as always. Have a beautiful day, and hopefully I'll be back with more videos. With this type of censorship, I can only imagine it's only a matter of time until they come for me again. They already did, so we'll see what happens. Thanks to everybody supporting on patreon.com/raretalk. It allows me to even do this. I have these hats on dreamrare.com. The pink ones are there. I know the white and black ones are sold out. They'll be back soon, but we have pink ones and hats for now. My free email list is stayintouchwithme.com, and thank you again for watching. I appreciate you.